All right, check, check. Can you hear me okay? Class dismissed. That's it. Lecture's over. I don't know which of these remotes works, so just give me 1 second. There we go. That one works. This is very much a talk in progress. I don't know if this is working that well. It is? It sounds okay? It's weird. I hear myself. I don't hear myself. Anyhow, I'm a brand new professor here. Like many of you, I'm here to get educated. And so what I'm trying to do with a new set of research is expand the kind of work I've been doing looking at bad people on the internet and understanding the role of images and media in a very broad sense, media as in any kind of artifact of communication, and how it augments the way that our politicians behave, augments how our culture is diffused and received, changes our everyday worlds, what we do all day. If you had told me when I was 15 years old that when I turned 43, I'd be spending a high preponderance of my time checking email, I would have said, what's that? Right? So now, many of you are faced with the fact that you spend most of the day producing and consuming content. When I was younger, we just consumed content. You'd go to the store, you'd get a CD, you'd go to the dépanneur, the convenience store, you'd get a newspaper, you'd turn on the radio. If you wanted to hear your favorite song again, you might tape record it so that you can hear it later. I became an avid collector of vinyl records, so I would spend a lot of times browsing in stores. But now all of that stuff is at your fingertips. It's not hard to find many different sources of media. It's not hard to find media that you recycle and go back to. And online, many of you probably already know this, and I just sound like some boomer saying that memes are an important way in which people online communicate with each other, not just within groups, but also external to other people. And you either get it or you don't. You get the joke and you think it's funny and you laugh and you might share it, or you don't get the joke and you don't care. You just move on. Sort of like the way that many people date these days. It's like, oh, they're wearing weird sunglasses. Oh, another picture of a man with a fish or a guitar, right? We know it. We know it. Why are all the dudes taking pictures with dead fish? Like, I don't think that's attractive. But anyway, I digress. But what I'm saying is that the content of our world has really changed. And there are a few things that I find quite unexpected, like meme wars. So mimetic warfare is the use of slogans, images, and video on social media in persuasive political campaigns. And when I started writing about memes, it was really about, young political types, very insurgent type of messaging, lots of things that had to do with social movements. If you were even alive in 2011, you might remember the Occupy movement. Black Lives Matter is probably one of the most important memes of our decade. But slowly, and this has a lot to do with cultural adoption, it took a while for states and politicians to figure out how to meme. There's even a meme called the left can't meme. But in any event, what I'm trying to convey in this presentation is that it's not that simple anymore. It's not just that there are groups of people using memes to spread different messages, to argue for their certain political platform that they're interested in, but that political campaigns are paying lots and lots of attention to online messaging, online subcultures, recycling that content and then spitting it back to you in a mediated form where they insert their political messages. And I'll talk a bit about it as we go on. Anybody familiar with this green entity? A few of you. That's Pepe the Frog, but this is a meme inside a meme because he's supposed to look like the old army recruiting poster from the 20s, which was Uncle Sam pointing at you and saying, Uncle Sam wants you. And of course, they also blend it with the meme, Make America Great Again, which is, very famous from MAGA world. So when we talk about meme wars, though, they're often authorless. So if a meme is being put out by a political campaign and they've got, Biden's face on it, like the riding with Biden memes, you kind of know that it's just engineered messaging. Sometimes it's called a forced meme. But by and large, in 2016, there was only one. There was a little bit of memeing from Bernie Sanders' campaign, none from Hillary Clinton's, but Trump really took on memes as a kind of political tool. And so, but he wouldn't source them from his campaign. They would source them from other websites like Reddit, like 4chan, which is an anonymous message board. And even one meme he sourced from Stormfront, which is a well-known white supremacist message board that started in 1996. Memes promote in-groups and out-groups. So if you're in the military or you have friends in the military, they have a whole meme set that they're interested in. If you're from a different country than the US, you might have memes about food and dance and clothing that people whose culture is the US wouldn't understand. They don't know why it's funny. They tend to be sticky, which is an advertising term. That means that with good memes, they tend to haunt you in a weird way. Don't be suspicious, don't be suspicious, right? Some of them get stuck inside your head after you watch them time and time again on TikTok. And then they also promote participation. So the easy thing about memes is that you can continuously remix them. And they're very easy to remix because they're image files for the most part. And if you think historically and longitudinally about memes, memes were often used not just in advertising like just do it, I'm loving it, these kind of 3-word slogans that brands adopt. But they were also used in political campaigns like MAGA, but before any of yours time, things like I Like Ike, for instance. So memes really have this participatory quality to them, which is what makes them different from other kinds of campaign or political media. So I'll just give you a brief overview of some of the memes that we're seeing recently on the Republican side. Has anybody seen any of the dark MAGA, ultra MAGA memes? No, because none of you go on Twitter. A few people maybe. But these are from 2022. They were really trying their baddest to make MAGA great again. And there's Marjorie Taylor Greene with her laser eyes. You've got Rep. Paul Gosar. These are their actual accounts tweeting pictures of them looking like this because they were trying to make a meme. They were trying to make MAGA cool again. And then Trump was saying things like, this is ultra MAGA country. What's interesting about it is they can't ever get the meme straight. So they go from ultra to dark, back and forth, back and forth. And the same thing happened with fake news. When Trump started using the term fake news, he was supposed to be saying lamestream media, which was the way in which Alex Jones had started talking about mainstream media. And Trump really couldn't say it. He couldn't get it right. So then Alex Jones, who's a well-known, I guess the word would be extremist, that has a YouTube show and also a website, he then changed his talking point to fake stream media, and then Trump shortened it to fake news, right? And so these things evolve, but they tend to crystallize when someone with an important reputation or someone with some kind of clout uses the terms. Does anybody know who Dark Brandon is? Joey Biddens, right? So there was this meme going around, let's go Brandon. It was dumb. There was a NASCAR rally and someone was interviewing the winner of the NASCAR rally and another guy walked by and he said, F Joe Biden. And then the ESPN anchor said, what did he say? And another guy laughed and said, oh, I think he said, let's go Brandon. And that's how it started, right? And so dark Brandon appears as a product of the White House digital strategy team. So this comes directly from the White House. And what they're trying to do is co-opt that look of dark MAGA or ultra MAGA and then make it Joe Biden's. So I give you these examples so that you can understand that when we're talking about political campaigns, things have changed. They're different. The ways in which politicians think they need to reach every one of us has expanded greatly from the rarefied instances in which a political candidate might give a speech on the radio or give a speech on television, or in a moment of emergency, like an act of war, they might come out and do a press conference. But hearing from the president up until the time of Trump was very rare. And our society really used those moments of when the president came out to talk about governance as a way to think about, well, what's going to happen to us? What is America? What is America's role in this skirmish or that skirmish? We haven't been accustomed to very long presidents coming out and commenting on every single tiny thing that happens, including, stuff that happens on TV shows or Taylor Swift's newest single. And so it's really important that we think about the way in which the presidency has moved from being this very prestigious office, and now they're just hanging out with TikTokers, right? That's a very strange way to do politics. And one of the things that we've seen changing is what we call SpawnCon. People are a little bit familiar with sponsored content. So what if I were to tell you that politicians are paying off influencers to tell you about their favorite issue or to tell you about their campaign, and there's no responsibility from the content creator to tell their audience that they're being bought, right? That's the situation that you're in right now. If you were to buy an ad on television, it would have to have this disclaimer, you'd have to know who bought it. But right now, because of the way we act towards the internet as if it is a lawless, jurisdictionalist universe, where the kinds of laws that you would break, outside of the internet are allowed to happen. For instance, I actually can't just advertise my house as an apartment to rent that anybody can come rent, anytime, like it was a hotel. There are different laws, different jurisdictions. There are places where Airbnb gets retroactively banned, but certain cities don't allow for you to just keep doing this. They have codes where you have to, if you have a tenant, you have to go in and register with the city that you have a tenant. But Airbnb pops up and everybody's studio apartment full of bed bugs and cockroaches becomes the norm hotel room in, let's say, Alston, which I have had the displeasure of living in as well. So kudos to you that survive it. Or something like Uber. You can't turn your car into a commercial taxi, right? And take customers without having any kind of regulation. But somehow we treat Uber as if it's just a fine contract. People taxi drivers in New York would pay $100,000 for a license to drive a taxi. And then one day, those medallions, useless. Because Uber came in and said, we are going to operate this business and we are going to move so fast and scale so fast that no one can stop us. Regulation is going to have to catch up. I don't know if any of you had the displeasure of living in a city where they just dropped off those Lime scooters and people would throw them into the streets and put them, I've seen a few in the Charles, I'm not going to lie. But that is a way of doing policy. You can deploy technology, and if there's no policy that explicitly prohibits it, it is doing policy itself. So when we talk about social media and we talk about the lack of regulation for social media, what we're really talking about is that social media itself decides what the regulation is. Because we don't have laws to stop Facebook from expanding. We don't have laws to prevent Twitter from exposing us to misinformation. We don't have laws against Instagram purposely designing its products so that young people become addicted and cannot stop themselves from scrolling. There's actually 42 state AGs that are suing Instagram right now, including the Mass AG, about the product being harmful. So you can imagine a technology like the airplane. So the first person builds an airplane, flies it off a cliff and dies. We don't need policy for that. But the minute you start putting hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people on airplanes, we need air traffic control. We need TSA. We don't need TSA, but we have TSA. It's a joke. You guys got to loosen up a little bit, just a little bit. I know you're all here to get credit, so it's fine. But the point is essentially to say industries develop, and industries develop with regulation and policy that often only gets created because harms have happened. So for instance, the tobacco industry for many, many years denied that tobacco caused lung cancer. And then they would say, well, we're going to test our products. We're going to self-regulate. And when they decided to redesign cigarettes, they put the filter right where your fingers would go so that your fingers actually blocked the filter. So it was of no value, right? But they were claiming that they were doing something about this epidemic. And the only way that we ended up getting tobacco regulation had to do with the fact that people were getting sick and they were calling out from work. And epidemiologists and others figured out that there was actually a workplace cost to employing smokers, and that smokers in your workplace made other people sick. So the first thing they did was they banned smoking in the workplace. Now, professors used to love to smoke. Can you imagine coming into class and your professor lights up 10, 12 cigarettes in the 90 minutes that you have to talk to them? That was common in the 80s. You'd go to the mall, people would be smoking. There'd be ashtrays at the movie theater, right? Because that product was sold to people as a luxury item. Who would deny the working man a smoke, right? That was the PR strategy of tobacco. And we're here again with social media companies saying, well, it's not us, it's the people who use our products. They're the bad ones. It has nothing to do with the design of the platforms that's creating all these problems. And one of the things that I'm most interested in understanding is how war has started to play out in our new information ecosystem. And it begins sort of like this, as a bunch of jokes. You know, the old saying is first is tragedy, then is farce. I think our historical condition is first is farce, then is tragedy. So what matters here? What I'm thinking about is the weaponized design of the internet. This is an image that I'll explain in a minute, but weaponized design is electronic systems whose designs either do not account for abusive application or whose user experiences directly empower attackers. And what's important about these is when you have centralized communication, you can imagine at the middle something like a radio station, just broadcasts out. You turn on your TV, broadcast out. And then decentralized communication is a little bit more like the web. So you had a bunch of people making websites, and nodes of people could connect to each other through websites, but there was no way for people visiting the websites to connect to each other. But social media, which is the last distributed network, changes everything, because now anyone that sees a piece of content can contact other people who are commenting on that content. And it creates this literal web. It's not, the engineers are not metaphorical. Like, Windows 95 is literally about having a window into a program. That's it. That's why they look like little window panes. And here with distributed networks, you have this webbing effect that can be weaponized by people who have a lot of connections. Someone like Musk, who has, I think, well over 70 million. I don't know what the newest count is. But if you have lots and lots of connections, you can dominate the media ecosystem with your messaging. So misinformation is information whose inaccuracy is unintentional and spread unknowingly. This is the kind of information where someone might say, I heard this, you know, or they might forward it to you and say, sent as received. But for the most part, misinformation isn't a purposeful process. However, disinformation is information that is deliberately false, misleading, often spread for political gain, profit, or to discredit a targeted individual, group, movement, or political party. So we only call something disinformation if we know where it came from. We know that they're hiding either their identity or their intent. We know that they might be using growth hacking techniques or botnets or other kinds of manipulative techniques online. And this one is one of my favorite disinformation campaigns. Draft my wife, right? So they stole the imagery of the Hillary Clinton campaign. They took one of my good friend's pictures from his Flickr. This is my friend Aaron. This is a picture of his wedding, you know, and they took this picture and said, this guy looks like a dumb liberal. Let's put him in the campaign. And what they really wanted to do was deploy a bunch of memes on Twitter, Facebook, BuzzFeed, other places, and be able to say that Hillary Clinton is advocating for a draft of women and wives and daughters. And they made other kinds of media. They made a fake screenshot as if Hillary Clinton had already tweeted this out, saying, draft our daughters, stand up for equity, go get them girls. They're ready to go to war for her, are you, right? Stealing the logos again. He died for his country, now it's her turn. It's a bit much. Draft our daughters, right? And these are all deployed on social media. Now imagine you're a content moderator in Vietnam or the Philippines, and you see this, you're not gonna know it's disinformation. In fact, even people in the US didn't know it was disinformation because it looked as if it was coming from the Clinton campaign. So I want to talk a little bit more theoretically about why this matters and about what is shifting online that I haven't quite figured out yet, but I'm working on. And, you know, as I progress in my time here, I am going to be building a research team. So if you are interested in things like media manipulation and disinformation, please do get in touch. So I've been working a lot on meme wars. I wrote a book about it. It's a quick read, so take it or leave it. Not going to hurt if you don't read it. But meme wars are a competition over narrative, ideas, and social control in a social media battlefield. And they tend to have this tactic or this strategy of hiving and swarming. So open source projects operate in a chaotic style where methods, materials, and ideas are held in common, copied, traded, and shared, in the state of things in a functional but seemingly constant flux. So when you start seeing people sharing memes, it's very hard to discern if there's a pattern involved or not. But sometimes what's happening is that there are people who have planned, usually on a different web property or different platform, exactly how to go in and engineer meme campaigns and get them in front of politicians, get them in front of celebrities. You know, if you can get Cardi B to retweet you, there's a good chance your meme's gonna go viral. So how did they try to force us to look at dark MAGA? So on this anonymous message board, 4chan, someone started posting a bunch of posts like this with pictures of dark MAGA. You know, this is obviously Donald Trump. And then they say this, and this is just typical PR advertising copy. It's, is MAGA coming back? Is it true that Trump is going to sweep the nation again with a brand new campaign built around dark MAGA? Word on the street is that it's a no BS version of MAGA, kind of a MAGA 2.0. which takes all the winning aspects we love so much and cranks them up to 11. Who here knows the meme, I'm cranking it to 11? Right? What is it? Spinal Tap, right? Only boomers know this shit, okay? So word is once that Trump gets back on Twitter, that's when it's all going to get going again with him announcing his run for president very soon. So 4chan is a place where people will plant media manipulation campaigns, hoping that the people who use 4chan, the anonymous denizens of the internet, would go and then start spamming this across other social media platforms. And then they started sharing this, you know, oh, this is MAGA. This is ultra MAGA. Who knows what this is from? Greece? Yeah, only a few of us old heads that have a taste for cinema. But it's not made for teens and you know, early 20-somethings, you know, and then you have this, which is like a cross between Hulkamania and yeah, so he's kind of like Hulk Hogan, but not. And then someone, you know, basically started calling out the campaign and said, fourth meme that they tried to astroturf here, rolled out, was mocked mercilessly. Ultra MAGA is their next attempt, right? And so there are actually people online, political operatives, trying to get other people to participate in their disinformation campaigns. Because the one problem with social media is that you can buy engagement through advertising, but there's nothing like the sweet, sticky nectar of organic virality. We all know it. When something starts to do numbers, it gets exciting. You never know who's going to see it. You know, maybe Jake Gyllenhaal. What is his name? Timothy Chalamet. It's a weird spelling of Timothy, though, isn't it? Like, I always want to add an H into it. Anyway, so what ends up happening online is that there becomes this blurred line between citizens, civilians, and combatants. So when you're fighting modern warfare, you're thinking about 4 pillars of power, thought about as DIME: diplomacy, information, military, and economics. So when you saw the first stages of war in Ukraine, one of the very first things that the UN and international governments decided to do was shut off banking in Russia. And it made it really hard to transfer money in and out of Russia. Then they attempted diplomacy. Then, you know, there was a bunch of military might, I should say, resources sent to Ukraine. But not a lot of people talk about the information war that was fought. Why did Americans even care that Ukraine was being bombed? Right? And that has a lot to do with how social media is shaped, how public perception is shaped, and how we come to see certain people as worthy of living and other people as less than that. So the democratized nature of participatory media extends the concept of scalability, as anybody with internet access and basic tools can create and distribute their own media for the campaign, essentially becoming a node of the network. Where anonymity blurs lines between combatants and civilians in the information war, exemplifying conditions of 4th-gen warfare. So 4th-gen warfare just basically means that we can't tell the difference between who is a citizen, who is a civilian, who's a commentator, and who might be a political operative or an actual state actor. So all of these players are always present on social media. And you might think, oh, by virtue of going to Instagram, that someone's put up some gates and is like, oh, all these fake accounts, we're going to take them down. No, it's up to researchers, unfortunately, to spend a high preponderance of their time tracking down these bot networks, tracking down these militarized accounts, and trying to understand whose side are they even on. We saw a lot of this in the pandemic. Russia was spamming and doing memes about COVID-19 and didn't like, and saying that the vaccines were poison. And in countries that they did have an interest in, they were making memes that said essentially you should get the vaccine and you should get the Russian one because you don't want to trust vaccines from Europe or the US. And so we are seeing more and more of this online, not less and less, which is a really big problem because the internet is supposed to be fun, right? It's supposed to be like going to the mall or something. It's supposed to be for entertainment. But because we've mixed up all of our different social institutions on the internet and we're not entirely sure where each vertical should go, we have military campaigns being played out on the same social media that you're sharing pictures of your cats and dogs, right? I can't get a single laugh out of any of you. This is annoying. I'm gonna have to come up with better jokes. It must be me. So according to a study by the Oxford Internet Institute in 2020, cyber troops are government or political party actors tasked with manipulating public opinion online. There have been 81 countries that use cyber troops. Cyber troops use social media and the internet as it is designed while employing social engineering techniques like impersonation, bots, and growth hacking. It's very different from hacking or other forms of cyber warfare that directly attacks opponents or infrastructure. And this is a really important point because much of our cyber defense through the government is trying to stop someone from shutting the lights off on the Eastern Seaboard, right? That's what we care about when we care about cyber defense, is that no one can launch nuclear missiles from our bases. Our government to this day hasn't really produced a comprehensive program for looking at this kind of cyber troop activity online. And one of the things that seems to stand in the way of government actors is that it's very difficult to tell who's from a foreign country and who's American, because they often will enroll Americans. And what's important is that American military and police cannot study or surveil Americans. They can ask a researcher at Stanford to do it, but they can't do it themselves. And they also, cyber troops spend millions in online advertising, which is why we have to ensure that tech companies do more to protect our national security. And for example, Iran attacked Palestine on Facebook and Israel on Twitter in 2020. And I can guarantee you that this is still going on, but it's a very painstaking process to verify which accounts are really part of a cyber network, a cyber troop network, and which are just people passing along misinformation. So here's where it gets even more interesting. This is generative AI. So you can go on to Adobe stock photos and type in Israel-Gaza conflict, and it will generate AI pictures of destruction. These aren't real pictures of Gaza, right? They also try to tug on your heartstrings. This news network, which is part of the information landscape that does do different kinds of manipulation campaigns, have all these cute cats, right? With Palestinian children holding their cats under the rubble. This is all AI. It's all made up, right? And there's more. There were some that were very, very graphic that I obviously don't want to show you because, like, you're a human being and you have a heart, and I don't want to break. But be forewarned that even the things that you see that might be cute, might be cuddly, are not real. And we are, in my estimation, at the most full tilt of Netwar that I have ever seen as a researcher. And part of it has to do with how effective campaigns since 2016 have gotten at manipulating social media and manipulating public sentiment. So the tactics of Netwar are very interesting, and I will run down them very quickly. But there's a great journalist that you should all follow, Cheyenne86. He's on Twitter and Instagram, I think, as well. And he does running daily tallies of every kind of misinformation coming out of Israel and Gaza. So this one is a false recontextualized media. It's an old video that they purported was new in their tweet about it. And so Cheyenne, who's at the Wall Street Journal, incredible reporter, definitely someone I want to bring up to do some work with. So recontextualized media, that is taking one thing and saying it's another: bombed out building, tunnel, etc. Imposter accounts, we know this. Who among us hasn't catfished a little? Come on, guys. Come on. A little bit. Fact checks. We've even seen weaponized fact checks where the fact checks themselves are wrong and they're being used and deployed to make you sympathize with a certain outcome. Misinfographics, that is like really stylized numbers and graphs that aren't true, like how many people were killed in a particular war. Manipulated videos, especially the types that you've probably seen where it's, well, there's a lot of different ways you can manipulate video these days, but not just AI generated ones, but also ones that are clipped in a certain way or slowed down. Trolling or brigading, that is states hire large groups of people to troll the populations that won't come into alignment with the rest. And so patriotic trolling is a very common tactic of states. Evidence collages, hijacked accounts. Hollow sourcing just basically means that you write an article and you don't put anybody as your source. Or you say anonymous when you're just making it up. So these kind of tactics aren't just open for, young groups of people on 4chan that are trying to troll people and upset them, not just open to political campaigns, not just open to marketers, but are becoming more and more the tactics of governments looking to manipulate public sentiment. Is that for me? Oh, I thought it was for me. Okay. How long do I got? Oh, I should stop soon. Okay. So with networked incitement, this is another report that I did, and I'm trying to figure out how to blend Netwar with this concept of networked incitement. I think it's really important that we understand how networks work and how networks are changing the way in which we do war and politics. So we looked at about 500 defendants in January 6th. We looked at their entire affidavits. Some of them were 60, 70 pages long, and deduced from that what reasons they had for going to the Capitol. And many of them went to the Capitol on January 6th because Trump told them to. That was it. There's no, sometimes with sociology, it's just about letting people know that their assumptions are true. So a lot of people went because, unlike other protests in DC that had happened on December 12th or in late November, Trump had not told people to go. Trump told you to be there on January 6th, so people went. And what's interesting, if we think about incitement differently than someone yelling fire in a crowded room like this one, that's the standard for incitement, would be that I would say something and you would all run outside because I said something upsetting, or I said, okay, if you want an A in your class, we all have to go streaking. Like Will Ferrell in that movie. You guys saw that movie maybe? No. Okay. But if I cause you to do an unlawful act, that's incitement. And what's interesting, though, is there's something happening with networked incitement where people go online and they see that other people are doing it. They see that other people are going, and they jump on board. And this is the same way in which we've seen protesters go for protests over the last 10 years using the internet, is that they get hyped on the networking aspects of it. They get excited to see what's going to happen. The incitement part comes in when they break the law, right? So you can have a protest, nobody breaks the law, everybody gets heard. But with incitement, there has to be that element of rule breaking, law breaking. And I would even say it has to be an extraordinary kind of violence, like thousands of people who don't know each other storming the Capitol to try to prevent the election from being certified. And there's another account online that often does this kind of networked incitement as well. So there's an account called Libs of TikTok that do not like that children's hospitals treat some young people for gender affirming care. And so she makes it her business to call out doctors and hospitals on her account. And then what her fans do, or what her audience does, is they start calling in bomb threats. She also does it at schools that were promoting diversity and inclusion initiatives. And so they get a bunch of bomb threats. And what we've started to see is that it's not just that people have audiences online, but those people can then target certain groups or other large entities like a university, and their audience will take up the charge of doing dangerous and unethical things. And so I'm trying to understand the properties of Netwar that would make it so that another government or a foreign government or perhaps our own president could use the benefits and affordances of social media to deploy essentially their own private army. And I think it's possible. And I think it's possible because I've been thinking a lot about what makes a state. So Max Weber has a theory of justified power. He talks about traditional authority based on your status, like you're going to respect me because I'm a professor, but if we're out at the baseball game, you might not know I'm a professor, so I don't get respect everywhere. Class or status. Legal authority is based on agreements, contracts, and laws, which we know, don't break the law. Charismatic authority, though, is based on a personality. Certain types of presidents have gotten elected because they have a very charismatic way about them. Certain social movement leaders like Gandhi or MLK have had a strong momentum behind them. And then I was also thinking about Foucault's modern state power, where he talks about different kinds of authority being repressive authority, which is based on military might, law enforcement, social control. You have coercive authority, which is based on soft power rules, customs, culture. That might mean your mom says to you, okay, if you want this $20, you got to clean your room, right? And then the next time she says, well, you just got to clean your room. And then you're like, but I don't want to. And she's like, well, then I'm gonna ground you, right? That kind of soft power, coercive power. And then there's productive authority, which is based on the state's capacity to invent, promote, and support old and new institutions, corporations, and foreign states. So in many ways, what we're witnessing right now with the war in Gaza is state formation. And you see other states coming in and producing the conditions under which Israel can and can't invade Gaza, as well as which institutions are going to benefit from that and which ones aren't, and if they are even going to allow Palestinians to rebuild their own state. So authority has all of these different measures, but one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about with Netwar is that it's deployed across online territories. It's not necessarily bound by border, governed by proper juridical or court power, where old laws and regulations are not often enforced. So going back to thinking about Uber and Airbnb and why they can keep getting away with it. So the power structure of Netwar that I'm really working on, and it's an open question, it could change tomorrow, but I think it's governed by corporate terms of service, not the state. So you violate Facebook's rules for harassment, even if you're harassing someone that would be considered a law broken, in Boston or whatever. The terms of service are going to decide if you're guilty or not. Resources are not just monetary instruments, but the ability to scale, deploy, and command large groups across vast spaces and statuses. So it's not just that you have more money, therefore you have more speech, which is very common in our media landscape prior to social media. If you wanted to run a campaign and run for president, you had to buy ads on CNN and Fox News and local media and whatnot. You don't have to do that as much. And you can impose reality through a manipulated media and meta narratives, which means repeating dominant narratives. And we see that quite a bit these days. And it gives rise to a new power elite while eroding Democrat institutions. I have to wonder if in 10 years, Musk will declare himself king. I'm hoping he makes himself bankrupt before then. But the man is building rockets, right? That's another way to talk about spaceships, right? And so we have to think about, well, what happens when somebody completely unaccountable to any state or any government is able to have so much net power and have so much influence over our information landscape? where our democratic institutions have to bend to their will rather than our democratic institutions be enhanced by their products. So I wrote about this in the Washington Post. I talked about no longer an emerging technology imbued with the possibility of fostering social change by giving voice to small groups. Social media has become a tool of the powerful to dominate, harass, and coerce vulnerable groups. If we do not acknowledge this shift, the freest speech will benefit only those who are already powerful. And so I thank you for your time. And I'll stop making movie references because maybe I'm in the wrong line of work. Any questions? So I solved the problem. In the back. Yeah, so depending upon how you surf the net, does everybody aware of what a Facebook pixel is? So Facebook has this advertising technology called the pixel that's on nearly every website you visit. So Facebook does keep track of everywhere you go on the web, whether you're on Facebook or not. They also create shadow profiles of people that don't have Facebook and keep track of their advertising and consumption on the net. So Mark Zuckerberg has recourse to so much data about individuals, but nobody's personal data is actually worth anything. Data only makes sense in relationship to other data. So it has to be in a networked arrangement because they don't sell ads to individuals, they sell ads to buckets of individuals. They literally refer to you as buckets. And then there's waste, which is people who essentially don't buy the advertising or don't see it, or are fake accounts. So the empire that Google has built around data has recourse to every single email that you've ever written on Google or on Gmail. And they use that to train AI. There are other ways in which your data is bought and sold without ever knowing it. And this goes back to the days of lucrative magazines. So in the 80s, if you signed up for Sports Illustrated, they would sell your name and address and even your phone number to other companies, and then you would get mailers. And so depending upon which company you've signed up and given your data to, they then can take that data and sell it to a bunch of other people. But when it comes to a company like Facebook, because they've amassed so much data, they have more precise accounting about the US Census than the US government does, right? Even our telecoms data is now tracking every single one of us and that we are all in the same room together. So if we ever wanted to get together and commit murder together, we gotta leave our phones behind because they're gonna be able to track us down, right? I grew up in a world where none of that existed. My mom said, you know, don't be home too late. There was no way to track me down. There was no way to surveil me at this level of in this granularity. And if you were being recorded, you could see it. But even our classrooms were equipped with different kinds of monitoring technologies. And so what I'm saying is it really matters who owns those technologies. And it really matters how those technologies are regulated. Specifically for students, you should be really well aware of these new test taking, remote proctoring. Has anybody ever had to take one of these remote proctored exams? And if you like sneeze or you move to the side, they might accuse you of cheating, right? We have to resist in some ways those kinds of technologies in order to save the next generation of people from them. So with Netwar, we have to be very careful at this new class, looking at this new class of billionaire that made all of their money extracting data from people and then reselling it. Another thing that's just like, in my mind, but I don't exactly know how to sew it up yet, is the state invented statistics. The word statistics means science of the state. And if you think about the state governing by data, which is how liberal democracies work, it's interesting to think about a state-like entity like Facebook having more data about the state than the state itself, right? And what that might give rise to in terms of certain kinds of services they might offer. For instance, in another country, Facebook is also not just how you access the web, but it is also delivering Wi-Fi via drones. You can buy a Facebook phone. And so it all starts to seem a lot like what we might call enclosure or capture. And so that's what our government is supposed to protect us from when we have these anti-monopoly laws, we have these laws against too much incursion into our private lives. So there's a lot at stake, unfortunately. Yes.
So for our students and others listening, can you leave us with maybe 2 or 3 things that actions we can take to wrestle this, to protect ourselves, or to feel like not as victims here?
I mean, unfortunately, we really are. The way Instagram is designed, if you ever feel like you can't get off Instagram or you're waking up in the middle of the night just for a quick scroll, you know, just gonna go do a little doom scrolling, no big whoop. They're built that way. They're built for that intended purpose, and you are not alone in that. You're not alone in that feeling. You're not alone in your feeling of feeling isolated or not living up to the cool lives that our friends have because of the way that social media advances social comparison. So I think it's really important that we take a step back from social media, not to say, oh, let's turn it all off, because I think that that's a fool's on it. But I think it's also incumbent upon imagine technology as serving us rather than us as being slave to it. And what that looks like is being disciplined about your use of social media, being disciplined about the amount of notifications you receive every day. I would lose my mind if I got, get 400 notifications a day. Do you know how many times that interrupts you? Do you know how much lost time is in those 400 notifications, right? So things like that, turning off your notifications, using text messaging groups rather than DM groups, that can help because it's not going to put you inside the platform just to check your messages, right? You're talking to your friends, and your messages, if you use Signal or private, they're end-to-end encrypted. And so there are little things we can all do, but I also think, you know, y'all are entering into careers as media professionals, right? The game isn't to boycott it. The game is to build it better, right? So many of you have incredible skill sets here. And it's important when you're getting your education to learn as much about technology as you can, because it's always going to advance. It's always going to move one step ahead of you. And so by the time you get out of school and you're working a job, there will be something new. And so, you know, back in my day, people used to talk about, you know, Friendster and MySpace. You know, think beyond those kind of boxes. Think beyond that and think about, well, what is it about media that I want to serve me? What is it about news that I want out of news? And seek. What's interesting about social media is news finds you. You don't really have to go searching for it. And it acts as a panacea or a just kind of like a warm hug when you're bored. But it also turns into a bit of a twitch, like you can't not look at it. And so think about that and think about working intentionally with technology as part of your career. Because there's also really awesome things that people can do with technology, but it has these components to it. And I think if we're talking about tech policy, if any of you are interested in policy and technology, it's so important that we get the reins of technology, not just to bring down the new power elite and make them have to build products that aren't harmful, but also so that we don't let these technological oligarchs overrun the government that is supposed to be ensuring our safety. You know, I think, you know, democracy is a participatory process. And so you're not going to have it if you don't give a shit about it. And I also feel like that about good technology is you're not going to have good technology if you don't care about what it is that you're consuming or working with.
So it is 4:30. Let's
Yeah.
give a big hand to Dr. Joan.
Thank you.